As much as I'd love to have a moment, I'm just...
Hello survivors, and welcome to Survivor's Guilt, the only channel that determines your odds of surviving 2011's straight-to-video disappointment, Hostel Part 3. So stay tuned till the end for your survival stats. I'm your sharp-dressed slasher turned bachelor party stripper, GhostFake. Now I hope you like the weakest link in a 3-link chain, cause this movie is getting spoiled. Hostel Part 3, written by Michael D. Weiss and directed by Scott Spiegel, starring Brian Hallisay, Kip Pardue, John Hensley, Sarah Habel, Skyler Stone, and Chris Coy. Hostel Part 3 is about 4 friends in Las Vegas for a bachelor party that get trapped in the exploits of the American branch of the Elite Hunting Club. Hostel Part 3 might not be a bad movie, but it's definitely not a great Hostel movie. It's hard to make a good installment of the franchise when you have a different writer, director, setting, and actors. And it certainly doesn't help when you take away the plot and the threat from being unknown, and almost turning it into a game. You'll see what I mean here shortly. We open up to Travis walking to his hotel room, only to open the door to Ukrainian couple Anka and Victor, who have overstayed their welcome, but welcome Travis with the classic,
"Gave me the wrong key."
Not your bad. We stay a little long.
I've heard this one before they offer for Travis to drink with them, but Travis BHOB and offers them each a beer, which they gladly take.
I like this guy. He brings party with him, huh?
Anka heads to the bathroom to take a shower while Victor and Travis talk about cuck stuff. But when Victor goes to ask something of Anka, he finds her laying on the ground unresponsive, before he too begins losing his faculties. He pleads with Travis to call a doctor, but Travis, who doesn't want to saddle foreigners with grade A medical debt, just looks on disinterested as Victor passes out. Travis then calls in his goons, who enter the room from behind a false mirror, and bag up the bodies and put them in the van, before we see Travis's sweet bloodhound tattoo. I see what you did there, and though I enjoy a good twist on a trope, this one just felt hollow, which is pretty much the worst thing about Hostel 3. It just kind of feels hollow. Cut over to Scott and his fiancée Amy as she kisses him goodbye, as Carter arrives in the airport shuttle to pick up Scott as they head to Vegas for Scott's bachelor party.
You know, since I am the best man, which clearly I am, why is it that she's marrying you?
But Amy thinks that they are going to Palm Springs, and in the shuttle, Carter drops the news to Scott that they aren't going to Palm Springs. Once they're in Las Vegas, we get introduced to Mike, who really hates his wife.
Engagement ring, wedding ring, supper ring.
And Justin, who is disabled and also kind of a conspiracy theorist.
And it's all just to take your money. I'm telling you, man, this place is evil incarnate.
And also the only redeemable one of the lot. They gamble for a bit before trying to find something else to do, when they get approached by Kendra and Nikki, who invite the quad to a place off the strip. They head to the address the girls gave them expecting a club, and instead get a factory. And as they walk through the dingy hallways, Scott gets a call from Amy, and his friends continue on. She asks Scott if she should be worried, as he was supposed to call her and didn't, and he tells her not to worry. He hangs up the phone and finds that his friends are nowhere to be seen, but as he looks around for them, someone throws a hood over his head and straps him to a wheelchair, before shoving a funnel into his throat and pouring in a mystery liquid. Before they rip the hood off, and his assailant rips her cloak off, and we find out that it was a setup, and now he's at his bachelor party. And we find out that Kendra is indeed a prostitute, and we also find out that Justin's disability is a major turnoff for prostitutes.
I'm Justin.
I'm sorry, I gotta go.
And Nikki leaves with Mike. Cut over to the champagne room where Kendra is trying to sex Scott, but Scott keeps pushing off her advances. Scott tells her that a year ago he was unfaithful and almost lost his fiancée, and has decided to not be that guy anymore.
I told myself that I wasn't gonna be that guy anymore.
Before Mike and Nikki come in to utilize the room, which is great timing because Scott feels sick and leaves to go get some air.
Air's good. Air's good. Get some H2O. No, that's water.
And Kendra also leaves the room to Mike and Nikki. Scott heads outside and throws up before realizing he's locked out, and he passes out as the cab driver walks towards him. The next morning, a black van drives into the middle of nowhere in the desert to this random building. Cut over to the Quad's hotel room where Scott wakes up to Carter making smoothies, and they talk with Justin about how the cab driver brought Scott back, and they realize that Mike is missing. Cut over to Mike, who wakes up on a cot in a cage, and across the way he sees Victor in his own cage.
I'm thinking I'm not gonna die in here.
Die! Who said anything about die?
And the guards come over to shock Victor while they haul Mike into a room with a bunch of tools and a chair they lock him in. A curtain opens up to reveal a crowd of elite hunters who are bidding on what punishment Mike will endure. Travis also looks on, as well as a character named Fleming that we just now have been introduced to. A man enters the room with Mike, and he begins mapping where he will be making cuts on Mike's face, as the crowd bids on his fate. The dude cuts into Mike's face and begins peeling it off. He then places the face on his styrofoam mannequin and then leaves the room to the applause of the elites. And the curtain closes, curtain calling Mike into the meat bank at deposit number 45. Later that day, Mike's friends continue looking for him when Justin mentions that he got Nikki's card from her and can use his internet powers to find out where she lives. Cut to the Shangri-La trailer park, where the trio find Nikki's trailer. And when no one answers their knocks, they decide to enter in the old-fashioned way, by breaking in. While Justin stays outside to keep look. They look around and don't find anything or anyone, before Kendra and her friend Beardo come breaking in the door, waving their guns around wildly. Scott explains that they need to talk to Nikki to find out where their friend Mike went.
Okay, so you broke into her house.
I think this is actually a trailer.
But Kendra tells them that Nikki didn't come home either. Cut over to Nikki, who is strapped to some sort of table, and a dude looking like he's from Hostel 1 or 2 sprays a bunch of crap in her mouth and all over her body before he dumps a bunch of cockroaches all over her. Dane Cook? Is that you? The roaches then funnel into her mouth and suffocate her, funneling Nikki into the meat bank at deposit number 46. Cut over to the newly formed quad, who've decided to retrace their steps from last night in hopes of finding Mike and Nikki. Justin wants to call the cops, but Kendra tells them that it's no use because people go missing off the strip all the time, and that people aren't considered missing until they've been gone for a whole week. But when they arrive at the factory, Justin receives a text from Mike.
I got a text from Mike.
What is he saying?
From Nikki's phone, apologizing for disappearing all day before sending them an address to meet him at. They head to the place, which turns out to be that hotel from the beginning of the movie. Justin opts to wait in the car while the other three go inside to find them. They enter the room and find Nikki's purse and Mike's phone, and a note that says they stepped out for a minute. Carter walks over to the mirror, and as he adjusts himself, someone comes through the mirror and sprays him with some sort of knockout agent, before doing the same thing to the others. Justin notices the bodies being loaded into the van and gets out of the SUV to get a closer look, but ends up getting approached by Travis, who tells him that Mike sent him before macing him, and then knocking him out and throwing him in the back of the van with the others. Sometime later at the facility in the middle of the desert, the guards take Justin from the cage and Carter gets their attention long enough to show his neat bloodhound tattoo, which is like a get out of cage free card in this establishment. Carter then meets with Fleming and Travis, and we learn that Carter is a top tier client, and kidnapping Scott was a personal request of his, and that Nikki and Kendra as victims will make up for the added difficulty, and that his friends Mike and Justin are just collateral damage.
Collateral damage?
They were always more his friends than mine.
Speaking of collateral damage, we cut over to Justin, who is now in the hot seat, and the guards leave the room and allow it to fill with smoke. A woman comes in and begins shooting crossbow bolts into him, as the crowd wagers on how many he can survive. Ugh, I guess the answer's 9, but it would have been 1 if she would have made that her first shot, bolting Justin into the meat bank at deposit number 47. Cut over to Victor, who is crying about Anka and trying to plan a way to break out, when the guards arrive to take Scott. Cut to the main event, where Scott is locked in a chair wearing a white tux, and Carter comes in wearing a black tux.
I guess now I'll wear it to your funeral.
He explains that he's always wanted Amy, and he's certain that he'll be able to be with her when Scott is out of the picture. And he also admits to having killed a girl by skinning her alive.
To kill a girl at the club in Macau. I skinned her alive. It took me 6 hours.
Skinning that girl into the meat bank at deposit number 48. He tells him that the rush of killing randos doesn't get him off anymore, so he's resorted to killing his best friend. But right before he gets started, Fleming tells Travis to make the call, and they tell Control to release Scott, and the epic showdown begins. And the crowd applauds as the two of them beat the piss out of each other. And when Scott comes out on top, he cuts the tattoo off of Carter so as to be able to leave the room, and the elites begin bidding on who gets to kill the groom, as Scott makes his way down the hallway with a mace. Meanwhile, Victor calls the guard over to zap him, but steals the taser and shocks the guard, before he takes his keys, gets out of the cage, and electrocutes the guard into the meat bank at deposit number 49. Cut over to Scott, who nails this dude in the chest with his mace, macing him into the meat bank at deposit number 50. Travis tells Fleming about the 2 escaped prisoners, and he orders Travis to have security round them up. Victor grabs an axe and begins hacking at the power lines, I guess, and knocks out all the power. And when the guard comes around the corner, Victor wedges the axe deep into his chest, and the guard blows Victor away at deposit number 51, before succumbing to the axe at deposit number 52. So I guess that one's a draw then. Meanwhile, Scott finds a phone and calls the cops, and the cops are able to use the phone to determine the location. And Fleming tells the elites to stay calm.
We are experiencing a temporary power interruption.
And that they will be escorted to their vehicles, before telling Travis to kill any and all prisoners. Scott then finds the shotgun that killed Victor and goes to save Kendra, dispatching this guard in the process at deposit number 53. He frees Kendra, but as they run down the hallway, Travis shoots Kendra in the ass. And Scott runs away. Travis then finishes Kendra off in the meat bank at deposit number 54. Huh, I didn't expect her to die, let alone so unceremoniously. Fleming sets the building to self-destruct mode. Neat. And then jumps in his SUV to leave, but gets held up by Carter, who has a bone to pick with him, which he then picks at with a knife. A whole bunch. Cut over to Scott, who has just discovered his dead buddies when the boss fight begins. Travis spends his ammo before picking up a meat cleaver, and the two of them begin to spar. We also get another meat bank deposit with these prime cuts at deposit number 55, when Scott gets the upper hand and the meat cleaver, and the upper arm when he cuts off Travis's, and he then beats Travis to death with Justin's crutch into the meat bank at deposit number 56. Cut over to Carter, who dumps Fleming's nearly dead body out of the SUV before noticing the tire shredders and doubling back. He drags over Fleming's nearly useless body and uses it to protect the tires from the blades, making use of Fleming at deposit number 57. Scott sees the open fence and takes off towards it while Carter drives towards it. Carter escapes and then shuts and locks the gate before Scott can escape. The building explodes and annihilates Scott into the meat bank at deposit number 58. Cut to sometime later at Amy's house. The two of them mourn Scott's passing, and Amy tells Carter that she doesn't want to be alone.
I don't want to be alone tonight.
I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere.
And the movie ends. Just kidding. Amy brings out the wine and drops the news that Scott is actually alive and stabs his hand with a corkscrew.
He's alive!
Scott pops up and the two of them drag Carter downstairs and tie him to a chair, and Scott uses a rototiller to deposit Carter into the meat bank at deposit number 58, and the movie ends. Now let's take a look at our main characters and the death that surrounds them to determine your odds of surviving this movie. We start off our meat bank deposits with numbers 1 through 44 from the first two movies, followed by Mike facing off into the meat bank at deposit number 45, and Nikki gobbles cockroaches at deposit number 46. Justin dies after only 9 bolts at deposit number 47. The lady that Carter skinned alive slides in at deposit number 48. Victor tasers a guard's mouth at deposit number 49. This guard gets maced the hard way at deposit number 50. Victor shotguns in at deposit number 51, and this guard meets his axe when he and Victor tie into the meat bank at deposit number 52. This guard goes down fighting no one at deposit number 53. Kendra anticlimactics in at deposit number 54. This pile of meat prime cuts in at deposit number 55. Travis dies like a at deposit number 56. Fleming makes his diced up body useful one last time at deposit number 57. And we wrap up our meat bank deposits with Carter getting his face soil improved at deposit number 58. Into the meat bank. Now let's take a look at our survivors. We've got Beth and Sasha from part 2 and Scott from part 3, which means that out of a total of 61 characters, only 3 survive, giving you a 4.9% chance of surviving this movie. Given those odds, how would your mostly dead body get put to use one final time? Let me know in the comments below. And if this is your first time on my channel, go ahead and subscribe so that you don't miss out on any of my future videos. And a huge thanks to my patrons who keep the stats coming. And don't forget to mark your calendars for January 29th at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, when we'll be having a watch-along of Dead Alive in the Monster Fam Discord, followed by a live Q&A here on YouTube. I hope to see you all there. And, as always guys, thanks and don't die.